What if the moment your husband signs your marriage away is the same second the judge begins writing his downfall? The courtroom felt colder than January. Fluorescent lights hummed. The air smelled faintly of toner and old wood polish. On the back wall, a clock ticked too loudly, slicing the silence into thin pieces. Amara Lewis sat perfectly straight in the second row, spine aligned as if the bench had taught her posture. Her hands folded in her lap, fingers still, her grandmother's silver bracelet cool against her wrist. She had chosen simplicity, not because she was simple, but because power never needs sequins to be seen. At counsel table, Caleb Hart twirled a gold pen the way he used to twirl a curl of her hair in the years when they were young and shared a futon. He did not look at Amara. He tilted his head just enough to catch the Sloane Whitfield's gaze, the platinum blonde woman behind him, whose paper fan moved like a metronome set to victory. Sloane smiled, that lazy little curve of someone who believed life would always pour her the first glass. Caleb lowered the pen, one careful signature for the court, and, in his mind, a clean erasure of 12 years. When the nib scratched across the paper, the sound felt too loud. Sloane leaned in. "Finally free," she said, voice sugar-sweet and loud enough to bruise. Judge Rafael Ortega did not blink. 30 years on the bench had taught him the many shapes of theater, and this was the cheap kind. He slid the packet closer, scanned the pages with a steady hand, then looked over his glasses. "Mrs. Lewis, we will hear from you shortly." Amara lifted her chin a fraction. The black sheath dress, pearl studs, hair in a neat bun, her grandmother's bracelet. Rosemary still ghosted her fingertips from the pot roast she made last night, while Caleb rehearsed lies about a conference in Miami, and Sloane posted a disappearing toast to uncomplicated futures. If humiliation had a scent, it would be expensive jasmine on a shirt that was not hers. What you need to know is that it did not start here. There is never one beginning. There are little beginnings and little endings stacked like dishes in a sink no one washed. The night a certain event planner took a microphone on a dais dripping white roses, thanked the room for celebrating excellence and inclusion, and praised leaders brave enough to choose what is best, even when it is socially challenging. The pause after that sentence was surgical. Heads turned so slowly to find the only black woman at the executive table. Amara felt the heat rise from collarbone to cheekbones and did not grant the room a single blink. Later at the bar, two men compared marriages to car models. "He is finally going to upgrade," one murmured. The other huffed. "Wife seems nice, though." "So is a Honda," the first replied. "You do not drive it to a gala." Caleb stood beside Sloane, thanking her for an exquisite evening, with his fingers resting lightly around her wrist, as if she were an instrument only he knew how to play. When his eyes slid toward Amara, all she saw in them was a request for silence. Silence can be a wound. It can also be a weapon. She learned the difference the way a person learns a language by listening harder than she speaks. At home, she found labels on his colognes changed out of season, a crisp, heat-pressed shirt smelling like a hotel. He started arriving late with the same text. "Investors kept me." He stopped leaving his phone on the counter. The small lie was not that he was late. The small lie was that he believed she had forgotten how to count time. Sloane posted soft-lit restaurants, ocean view rooms, a first-class cabin ceiling, careful captions that never tagged but always bragged. Building the future with the best partner. A champagne flute clinked against another, and you could see the reflection of a man's cuff link in the glass like a star if you knew the constellation. The clip stayed online 20 minutes, but vanity and cruelty have a habit of underestimating the speed of a screenshot. Amara did not shout. She did not craft a social manifesto. She went to the bank. Mr. Ellis had opened their first joint account when their balance was $12 and a coupon for coffee. He had smiled kindly when they asked for overdraft protection, like it was a scholarship. Now he smiled tight, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Perhaps we should wait for Mr. Hart," he suggested, tone soft. "Mr. Ellis," Amara said, and the way she said his name removed the velvet from his caution. "I am here now." The screen glowed numbers that are not lovers and do not lie. A personal line of credit opened by Caleb, secured by the house, the little two-story with the elm out front, and the scuffed banister they had sanded together on one long spring weekend. Transfers labeled as payments to Whitfield Consulting, a business registered 6 weeks earlier to a suite number that belonged to a shared workspace with a ring light and ambition. The bank's paper smelled like ink and dust. She left with copies. On the walk home, she bought a black and white composition notebook at the corner store, the kind with a stiff cover and cheap ruled pages that never quite lie flat. On page 1, she printed a title in small, even letters. Things They Think I Will Not Notice. She wrote the date. She began a ledger. She added the gala speech and the car model comment. Not because you can litigate arrogance, but because you must remember it. She added the line of credit. She added screen grabs of a toast that should not have existed. She added a list of vendors who had suddenly begun to email Caleb directly rather than the household account. She added the afternoon she found a garment bag from a boutique that did not sell anything her size, and a receipt from a jewelry store with a purchase that did not appear on their shared credit card. The night he FaceTimed her from Miami, there was a second glass in the reflection of the hotel window, set down by a second hand. Proud of you, she told him gently. He blinked, not prepared for the absence of fire. He wanted the fight that would let him feel like a man closing a door for a reason. He did not know what to do with softness that kept receipts. The next morning, she ironed a blouse and took the train to Alicia Moreno's office. On the firm's wall, degrees gleamed in simple frames. Harvard Law, State Bar Honors. A photograph of Alicia as a girl standing in front of a neighborhood library, cheeks round, hair braided, eyes bright. Alicia listened. She did not interrupt to supply the shape of a narrative. She let the story be ugly all the way through. When it ended, she steepled her fingers. He thinks he is hiding a queen with pawns, Alicia said. We will remind him what a board actually looks like. Amara passed the notebook across the desk. Alicia flipped to the title page and nodded once. You came prepared. I came uninvited, Amara said. That is different. The plan was humiliating, only a view through the pride of a person who wants to flail. Alicia asked for strategy, patience, precision. Do not explode. Do not announce. Encourage him to be comfortable in his carelessness. Arrogant men overplay the third act. Our job is to let them. Law does not punish feelings, Alicia continued. It punishes conduct. Fraud is a crime. Bad faith is a doctrine. Judges do not like being used as props. Collect paper. Collect voice. Collect the things that survive when the world insists you are imagining them. For 3 weeks, Amara rehearsed a role that did not belong in any of the rooms Sloan occupied. Consent without surrender. Kindness with archives. When Caleb came home late and flushed with sun, she had pot roast cooling on the stove like a memory. He looked for a tripwire and found a table set, white plates gleaming. We are tired, she said after the dishes were washed. Maybe it is time to make choices that do not hurt so much. Relief made him sloppy. You are amazing, he told her. I knew we could be adults. He spoke the rest like a man composing a press release. You keep the house until we sell. We do a simple split. No need for lawyers. He kissed her forehead, like an apology pinned to a bulletin board, and went to shower with the door not quite shut. After he fell asleep, Amara lay on her side and watched the city lights pulse through the blinds. She thought of the 8th grade girls she mentored at the community center, their notebooks full of poems that tasted like metal. How do I become someone who will not break when they try to break me? One had asked. Her mother's voice arrived like an old radio turned low. Dignity is not what they give you. It is what you refuse to let them take. Sloane's feed bloomed with new places. A corner of a terrace with a view of a river across a city not theirs. The hem of a dress that cost more than 1 month of Amara's salary at the school. The caption, to uncomplicated futures. The clip hovered online for minutes. Vanity is fast. Screenshots are faster. On a Tuesday, a delivery arrived at the house. A garment box addressed to Caleb. Inside, a linen suit in a shade Men's Magazine's callstone. Tucked into the tissue paper. A card in Sloane's looping hand. For the day we make things official. He left the box on the bed in its pretty ribbon and went to take a call, mouthing words about investors. Amara photographed the card, returned the ribbon to perfect alignment, and slid the box under the bed where moths and memory collect. She cataloged. She saved. She did not gloat. She cooked, worked, graded papers, texted the girls, and emailed Alicia every Friday at 5 with a subject line that never changed. Weekly. Alicia replied with one word that also never changed. Received. On the morning before the hearing, Caleb stood in the kitchen fastening cufflinks polished to a cruel shine. "Let's be decent," he said to the microwave reflection of his own jawline. "No fireworks." He bent to kiss her forehead as if conferring mercy. She smoothed his lapel. "No fireworks," she agreed, "only facts." The courthouse hall smelled like burnt coffee and sanitizer. A bailiff called the docket numbers. People moved as if their shoes weighed a pound more than they did last week. In the gallery, whispers rose and fell. Sloane's perfume arrived before she did. A white flower in winter. She sat directly behind Caleb and crossed her legs carefully, the sole of her shoe clean as a new coin. Caleb's lawyer checked his watch with a flourish. He slid the packet across the table as if handing the judge an hors d'oeuvre. "Your Honor, we have a consensual agreement," he announced. "My client has signed. Mrs. Lewis will do the same, and we can all be home for lunch." Alicia stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "We do not oppose a swift end, Your Honor. We oppose theft pretending to be consent. May I approach?" The judge's eyebrows lifted a millimeter. "You may." Alicia placed 3 folders on the bench, the way a magician places cards he does not need to watch. Folder A, bank statements documenting unauthorized transfers totaling $247,000 to Whitfield Consulting, owned by the paramour seated behind Mr. Hart. Folder B, a personal line of credit secured by the marital home without Mrs. Lewis's knowledge. Folder C, social media exhibits and recordings, including a video in which Mr. Hart states his plan to sign tomorrow, so he will finally be rid of the baggage. The bailiff pressed play. 2 glasses, a candle. Caleb's voice relaxed with the muscle slackness of a man who thinks the door is locked from the inside. Sloane's paper fan slowed, then stopped. Caleb's gold pen stopped spinning and settled on the table with a soft click that sounded like a sentence ending. Judge Ortega removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, as if men like this had carved a permanent groove there. "Mr. Hart," he asked gently, "did you read what you signed? Because the document I'm holding assigns 80% of marital assets to Mrs. Lewis, along with rehabilitative support, and if you insist on treating a court of law as a stage, the least you can do is learn your lines." The color leached out of Sloane's face. Caleb attempted a smile that had opened doors for him since he was 25. It did not open this one. "Counsel," Alicia continued, "we request immediate injunctions, a freeze on accounts in Mr. Hart's name, reversal of the Whitfield transfers pending investigation, and conversion of these proceedings from consensual to contested for documented bad faith." "Granted pending review," said the judge without fanfare. He turned to Amara. "Mrs. Lewis, anything you wish to add?" She rose, her knees did not wobble. She thought of her girls, their questions, of peas shelled at her mother's kitchen table, of the word free when it meant something different. "Only this, Your Honor. I believed my marriage was a partnership. When I discovered it was not, I believed the law would be. Thank you for proving me right." He nodded once. The gavel struck wood and drew a small gasp from the gallery. The bailiff began to call the next case, as if lives do not tilt when wood meets wood. Amara sat, the bracelet cool on her pulse. Behind her, someone exhaled like a tire losing air. Ahead, a man she had once called home looked at the ground as if searching for a trap door he might slip through without anyone seeing. There was no trap door. There was only the door she would walk through with her head level and steps measured. Caleb turned then, the first real look all morning. It was not love, or even apology, that flickered across his face. It was recognition. The moment a person realizes the opponent in the game is not the one he practiced for. Sloane's hand touched his shoulder, fingers tense. The fan stopped moving. Her eyes darted, then landed on Amara with a new expression she had not worn before. Something like respect's uncomfortable cousin. Alicia leaned closer to Amara and whispered one sentence that landed like a promise. "Now we build." If you have ever tasted the metallic tang of humiliation, you already know the sweetest revenge is not rage. Rage burns hot and fast and leaves you cold. Preparation warms you quietly while you work. Patience is the hard muscle you grow in the dark. Proof is the light you switch on when the room goes silent. That is what Amara had brought to this room. Not theatrics, not even triumph. Proof. In the corridor outside, shoes clicked on tile, and voices tangled into a courthouse braid of grief and relief and bureaucracy. Amara did not rush. She moved the way a woman moves when she has learned that the most dangerous thing she can be is unafraid. At the revolving door, she paused and looked at the gray sky pressing down on the city. She thought of Rosemary and the futon and the elm tree and the little girls whose poems were metal and fire. She thought of a composition notebook with a title page and the date in the top right corner. She stepped into the street, and the air felt less like January. Inside the courtroom, the clock resumed its steady, uncomplicated tick. Outside, her phone buzzed with a message from Alicia. "I will send you a summary of orders by end of day. We begin discovery immediately." Her reply was simple. Received. And somewhere across town, a woman with a paper fan clicked open her social media app and stared at a blank screen. A person suddenly aware that the performance had ended and the lights were very bright. Amara's story did not end with a gavel. It rarely does for any of us. It ends, if it ends at all, with the quiet work that happens after the noise. But that is not for this chapter. For now, remember the opening question. What if the moment your husband signs your marriage away is the same second the judge begins writing his downfall? In this room, under these lights, on this morning, the answer arrived in the shape of a woman who brought a pen of her own and a page with her name at the top. There is a sound paper makes when it stops being paper and starts being a weapon. It is not loud. It is the dry whisper a folder makes when a hand opens it with purpose. Amara heard that sound 3 days later in Alicia Moreno's conference room as a paralegal slid a stack of subpoenas across the table. "We begin discovery," Alicia said, tapping a yellow tab. "Bank records, vendor invoices, the WeWork lease for Whitfield Consulting, airline receipts, hotel folios, credit applications. Emails from Caleb's work account sent after midnight to a person on a first-name basis. We are not guessing now. We are counting." Amara traced the edge of a tab with her thumb. Counting was what had saved her before. Months of columns in a composition notebook had become a blueprint. Now the blueprint would become a building with doors no one could lie their way out of. Alicia laid out the week like a chessboard. "You have a full-time job. I am not asking you to make this your second one. We will carry the weight. But there are 3 things only you can do. 1, keep living. 2, do not take the bait. He will call. He will charm. He will offer something sweet that tastes like mercy. It is poison. 3, write. Record everything. Every call, every apology, every almost confession. Small facts win big cases. Living for Amara meant walking into the school courtyard the next morning while a 4th grader practiced her violin with the bravery of someone who didn't know yet that adults could be cruel. It meant smiling at parents who had read the gossip in their neighborhood groups and didn't know where to put their eyes. It meant watching the principal, Ms. Lindstrom, pause in her doorway as if she might say something kind and then decide against it, not because she was unkind, but because she had learned the art of avoiding a scene. In the staff lounge, 2 teachers discussed international travel loud enough to be heard in the hallway. Amara poured coffee and stirred it without sugar. She could taste the sweetness in the room anyway. The performance of sophistication that often meant nothing more than a willingness to sign a check with the right name in the memo line. She walked back to her office and found a sticky note on her keyboard from one of her mentees. "Miss L, I wrote a poem about armor. Will you read it?" There were 3 little hearts drawn at the bottom, fat and imperfect. "Armor," Amara murmured, and slid the note into her planner. At lunch, she called her mother from a bench under a ginkgo tree that shed its leaves all at once when the weather decided without warning to be honest. Her mother picked up on the first ring. "You eating, baby? I'm trying. The pot roast is gone. I made soup. You made soup. Then you eating." Her mother paused. "You sound taller." Amara laughed. "Taller?" "Yes, taller. People can grow up in a week when they have to. You bring your notebook everywhere. The one with the marbled cover? I do. Good. Paper is a better friend than pride. That night, discovery became a living thing. Emails arrived from banks with encrypted links. Alicia's office called to confirm service had been made on Whitfield Consulting. A courier delivered a thumb drive with security footage from a boutique hotel, whose bar wall was a mosaic of backlit bottles that reflected faces like tiny stained glass windows. In one frame, Sloane's hand slipped into Caleb's with the ease of a habit. In another, Caleb signed a receipt, and the camera caught the last four digits of a card Amara knew should not be paying for a $200 round of cocktails. The next morning, a knock sounded on Amara's door at 7:02. When she opened it, Caleb was on the stoop, hair damp, smile arranged just so. He held a white bag that smelled like the bakery where they used to buy almond croissants when Sundays were slow and gentle. "I brought breakfast." He lifted the bag like an offering. "Can we talk?" She did not step aside. "Talk about what?" "About us. About how this got so ugly so fast." His eyes shone, quicksilver. "We don't have to be enemies." "Enemies," she repeated, and the word tasted like tin. "My lawyer advises me not to discuss the case with you directly." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, then smoothed out. "I figured she would." He shifted tactics. "I'm sorry, Mara, for the optics, for hurting you. This isn't who I am." She looked at the bag. The grease blossom on its bottom had begun to widen. "You should throw those in the bin before they drip. There is a can by the curb." His smile faltered. "I miss you," he said softly. "You don't have to make this hard." She thought of the composition notebook. She thought of the bank's line of credit and the word hard sitting on her chest like a brick he had placed there himself. "I am not making anything," she said. "You did." He held her gaze for 3 seconds too long, then set the bag on the top step, as if placing a marker he could return to later. He left without turning back. Amara picked up the bag and walked it to the bin. At noon, Alicia called. "He came to the house, didn't he?" The softness in her voice was not pity. It was preparedness. "He brought croissants. He brought a story." "Good. We want him improvising. And now we make him read." By Friday, the first responses to the subpoenas landed with satisfying thuds. Amara and Alicia sat at the end of a long table while the paralegal flipped through printouts and called out highlights like a coxswain. "Flight 211 to Miami, 2 seats, first class, charged to the joint card, later reimbursed from Whitfield Consulting. Invoice 1897, private sommelier tasting, charged to a company Amara had co-founded with Caleb when they were young and terrified and brave. A wire transfer to an Italian boutique whose receipt line itemized a bracelet in a style Sloane had worn to the gala. The WeWork lease revealed something else. The corporate agent who filed the papers for Whitfield Consulting was the same agent Caleb had used 3 years earlier to restructure his own company's debt. It wasn't elegant. It was lazy. Lazy leaves fingerprints. Alicia smiled without showing teeth. "We will depose Miss Whitfield and Mr. Hart's CFO. The CFO will try to be loyal to his paycheck. Ms. Whitfield will try to be loyal to herself. The first can be pried open with numbers. The second unravels with silence." Silence. "Ask a question," Alicia said, "then stop. People like her hate empty air. They will fill it with the one thing that cannot be retracted." The deposition was scheduled for Tuesday in a windowed room 19 floors above a city that had a way of pretending to be polite from a distance. Sloane arrived 10 minutes late with an attorney whose cufflinks matched his tie pin, both small and unnecessary. She smoothed the front of her ivory dress and glanced at Amara, registering her presence the way a person registers an unexpected draft. "Record on," the court reporter said. Alicia began gently. "Please state your name for the record." "Sloane Whitfield. Occupation, event designer. Consultant. For which companies do you consult?" "Various," Sloane said, smiling like a magazine. "My skill set is versatile. Do you consult for Whitfield Consulting?" "Yes. Are you the owner?" "I am." "When did you found Whitfield Consulting?" "Last quarter." "Who financed your initial operating expenses?" "We have clients." "Who financed your initial operating expenses?" Sloane's attorney leaned forward. "Objection to form. You may answer. I used personal funds." Alicia placed a document on the table and slid it forward. "Exhibit 3. A wire from the Hart household account to Whitfield Consulting for $30,000 3 days after the business was registered. Can you identify this? Sloane's fingers hovered over the page. Her lawyer's jaw tightened. That is a transfer from the Hart household account. Her smile did not crack. I wouldn't know the source. It says it on the line marked source. Silence. A second passed. Then Sloane laughed, small and bright. I suppose it does. Did you consider those funds alone? They were support for business development that benefits everyone. Everyone. Yes, our work creates opportunities. Caleb is a generous man. Has he always been generous with other people's houses? Alicia asked mildly. Or only when he uses them as collateral? Objection. Counsel's tone is argumentative. Withdrawn, Alicia said, her voice as smooth as paper. Ms. Whitfield, who booked the following hotels and first-class flights. I don't manage our travel. Alicia slid forward 4 more exhibits, each with Sloane's name as the traveler, each with the Hart joint card as the payer, each with a screenshot of Sloane's now-deleted posts. Candlelight. 2 glasses. To uncomplicated futures. Sloane's eyes flickered, then steadied. Those were business dinners. With Mr. Hart. Yes, we were exploring partnerships. Partnerships. Alicia let the word sit, then released it. Ms. Whitfield, do you understand that misappropriation of marital funds is not a partnership? It is a problem. Sloane's attorney placed a hand on her forearm. We will not be responding to editorial questions. Then here is a non-editorial question, Alicia said, and her tone did not change. Did you or did you not facilitate transfers from Mr. Hart to Whitfield Consulting, knowing those were marital funds? I assumed everything was appropriate, because he told you so, because he is a competent professional. Alicia turned a page. Ms. Whitfield, you posted a short video the night before the last hearing. In it, Mr. Hart says, and I quote, "Tomorrow I sign and we're finally rid of the baggage." Who is the baggage? Sloane looked at the window, not the room. The city glowed like a thing she thought she owned. She turned back, held Alicia's gaze, and smiled a smile that fit better at a gala than under oath. No further answer, she said. Under oath is an answer all by itself, Alicia said, and wrote something in the margin of her legal pad that made the court reporter press her lips together to hide a smile. When it was Caleb's turn, he blustered. He tried the charm that had opened doors etched with other people's names. He tried the indignation of a man who believes the world should be grateful for the way he occupies it. He tried to ally himself with Amara the way a boy tries to join the team he has mocked all year when his own team loses. It did not work in that room. Mr. Hart, Alicia said, gentle as a blade, do you understand that moving assets out of reach during a pending divorce is bad faith? I do now. You did not then. I did not think of it that way. How did you think of it? He sighed, weary with the performance of being misunderstood. I thought of it as protecting my future. Your future funded by your present wife. He spread his hands. We both sacrificed. It isn't black and white. No, Alicia said softly, and the room cooled a degree. It rarely is. That is why we bring light. After the depositions, the city's afternoon leaned toward rain. Amara rode the elevator down with Alicia in a quiet that did not ask to be filled. When the doors opened, a woman from the cleaning staff pushed her cart in. She paused, eyes darting from the expensive carpet to Amara's face. You look like someone who made it to the next day, she said, voice low and warm. Amara smiled. I did. Good, the woman said. The next day is where the air starts to taste like itself again. On Saturday, Amara took her mother to the farmer's market and carried bags of greens and stone fruit, while people she knew from church pretended not to know which version of the story was standing in front of them. Her mother picked up a bushel of collards and set them back down. Baby, she said, do not spend your life asking small minds to open large doors for you. Build the door, then build the house around it. In the afternoon, Amara spread paperwork across her kitchen table. The elm outside the window moved like an old friend pointing out landmarks. She sorted exhibits into piles and labeled each with a sticky note. There was an order here if you were patient enough to see it. Money has a handwriting, so does contempt. At dusk, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. It was Ms. Lindstrom, the principal. "I wanted to check in," she said stiffly. "There have been murmurs among board members about optics. If you need to take a leave until this is resolved, we can discuss it." "Resolved," Amara repeated aloud when the message ended. "Resolved as if a life was a temporary leak under a sink." She did not call back. She wrote the message down in the notebook instead, under a new heading, "The price of other people's comfort." Then she turned to a blank page and wrote another heading, "What comes after?" The heading sat there, patient as soil. For the first time since the gavel struck wood, Amara allowed herself to imagine something beyond courtrooms and folders, and the dry whisper of paper turning to blade. She imagined a classroom of adults listening hard, not to gossip, but to truth. She imagined a training built on all the little beginnings that no one wanted to name. She imagined a firm that did not need to apologize for saying the quiet parts out loud. When Alicia's summary email arrived that night, it was not triumphant. It was clean, a list of wins, a list of next steps. A line that said, "Judge Ortega has set a status conference for 30 days out. Bring patience. Bring proof." Amara closed her laptop and stood at the window. Streetlights dotted the block like punctuation. Somewhere, Sloan was learning that silence in a deposition weighs more than applause at a gala. Somewhere, Caleb was telling himself a new story about himself, one where intention trumped action and regret had the power of restitution. Somewhere, the future was waiting like a door she would not ask permission to open. Paper had become a weapon. Soon, if she let herself, it could become a foundation. She reached for her phone, opened a new note, and typed a sentence that did not belong in any court file. Workshop outline, turning humiliation into a curriculum. She added 3 bullet points and a title that arrived like a bell. After the gavel. She put down the phone, turned off the kitchen light, and let the apartment be dark and quiet and ordinary. Tomorrow there would be more counting. There would also be soup, and girls with poems, and a ginkgo that would drop all its leaves in one honest hour. The next day, when she woke before sunrise, the city was the color of slate and possibility. She brewed coffee and wrote for an hour in the notebook until the border of the page ran out of blue lines. Then she showered, dressed, and walked out into the morning with a folder under her arm and the calm of someone who had learned to be taller. There are chapters that end with noise. Others end with a list. This one ends with a promise, the kind Alicia whispered after the judge's gavel fell. Now we build. Some hearings roar. Status conferences whisper. The difference is only volume. The consequences are the same. 30 days later, Amara stood once more beneath the courthouse's fluorescent hum, a folder under her arm thick enough to make her shoulder ache. Alicia Moreno walked beside her, coat open, expression the same fine calm that had unnerved every man who mistook poise for softness. At the far end of the corridor, Sloane's perfume arrived before Sloane did, and then Sloane appeared in an ivory suit the color of denial. Caleb followed, gaze sliding along the floor, as if answers might be printed on the tile. Inside, Judge Ortega skimmed the docket with the efficiency of a man who knew exactly how much human drama he could fit between 9 knives and lunch. When he reached their case, he looked up. "We are here on status and temporary orders. Counsel, I have read the papers." Alicia outlined the ask in sentences that clicked into place like well-cut joints. Exclusive use of the marital home to Amara pending trial, temporary support, immediate production of all outstanding financials, sanctions for discovery gamesmanship, a protective order preventing any further transfers, loans, or encumbrances without prior court approval. She did not raise her voice because the facts already had one. Caleb's lawyer rose with the smile of a man who sold umbrellas under clear skies. "Your Honor, we dispute the narrative. My client has acted in good faith. Any transfers were business-related. Mrs. Lewis is attempting to weaponize the process." Weaponize. The word sat there, sleek and empty. Alicia did not turn to look at Amara. She faced the bench. "Good faith does not require encrypted folders," she said. "It requires transparency. We asked for documents. We received curated gaps. We asked for complete bank records. We got a spreadsheet Miss Whitfield appears to have formatted herself, complete with a tab literally labeled friendly version." A low murmur slipped through the gallery before the bailiff's glare smoothed the air. Judge Ortega lifted a brow. Friendly version. Yes, Your Honor. The unfriendly version came from the banks. He reviewed the affidavits, the exhibits, the text messages with timestamps that disagreed with the stories told under oath. He did not rush. When he finally spoke, his tone was not theatrical. It was simple accountability turned into sound. Exclusive possession of the home is granted to Mrs. Lewis. Temporary support is granted in the amount requested, retroactive to the filing date. All accounts in Mr. Hart's name remain frozen except for ordinary living expenses pre-approved by opposing counsel. A protective order is entered. As for discovery, the court finds willful delay. Sanctions are appropriate. Counsel for Mr. Hart, you will produce complete unredacted financials within 14 days or we will discuss contempt. Caleb's mouth fell open and then closed, a fish finally noticing water. Sloane widened her eyes at her attorney as if he were a concierge who had misplaced her reservation. Amara heard none of it. She heard instead the quiet inside her own chest, a space expanding. Outside in the hallway, Alicia's paralegal texted a single line to the team. Temp orders granted across the board. The reply pings came back like distant fireworks. Amara exhaled and steadied herself against the cool marble. This was not the end. It was air. On the way down in the elevator, the doors stalled at the 10th floor. A man in a maintenance uniform stepped in, toolbox in his hand, eyes tired but kind. He nodded to the cluster of lawyers and then to Amara. Keep going, he said, as if reading from a script written only for her. Rust loosens when you keep turning. That afternoon, Ms. Lindstrom called again. This time Amara answered. Optics, the principal began, voice clipped but careful. The board is concerned. Perhaps stepping back until things are resolved would... Resolved is a legal concept here, Amara said, stopping the sentence with a gentleness that was not a request. The court just granted temporary orders in my favor. I will be at work on Monday. My students need continuity. If the board requires a meeting, I am available. But I will not voluntarily disappear to make anyone more comfortable. Silence. Then surprisingly, a small sigh that sounded almost relieved. Very well, Ms. Lewis, Ms. Lindstrom said. Send me the court order for our file. I will let the board know. On Sunday, Amara moved through the house with new eyes. The elm outside shook light through the blinds across the floorboards they had sanded together years before. She ran her fingers along the rail she had once stained with a brush bought with coins scraped from a jar. She tidied the guest room and carried the garment box with the stone-colored suit out from beneath the bed. For the day we make things official, Sloane had written. Amara set the card on the dresser and watched the afternoon sun turn the ink into something almost pretty. Then she slid the box back into the darkness where it belonged for now. That evening, she opened a blank document and typed a title that had been tolling at the back of her skull since the deposition. After the gavel. Turning humiliation into a curriculum. She outlined 3 sessions, each named for a muscle she had built without knowing she was training it. Listening harder than they lie. The ledger of disrespect. The law is not a stranger. She wrote for an hour until words stopped arriving, then closed the laptop and slept deeply for the first time in months. Monday brought a new rhythm. She taught. She answered emails. She ate a salad that tasted like obligation and a clementine that tasted like childhood. At 3:15, her mentee Mia walked into her office with a poem clutched in both hands. It was called Armor. It began with a confession and ended with a door. Can I read it at assembly? Mia asked, eyes bright. Yes, Amara said. Read it the way the truth sounds. At 6:40 p.m., Alicia called with a tone that meant news, not disaster. We got something from the CFO's production, she said. There is an internal memo. It references a plan to streamline marital exposure. That is not a phrase you want in your inbox. The memo was thin but devastating. A bulleted list discussed timing, optics, allocations. At the bottom, a line. Confirm SW will keep posts vague. The initials did not need a key. Amara sat at her kitchen table and felt anger arrive like heat, clean and directional. She did not post. She sent the memo to Alicia, labeled it Exhibit 41, and wrote a single sentence in her notebook. Vagueness is not innocence. 2 days later, at 7:17 a.m., her doorbell rang again. Caleb, unshaven, held a folder in contrition. "We need to talk," he said. "Not about us, about settlement. The judge is bleeding me. Let's be rational." Rational. He had used that word when he told her they should sell the couch instead of paying for the repair because you do not fix things that are past their use. He had used it when he told her a home was an asset, not a memory. He had used it when he gave away their Sundays to make room for other people's champagne. Amara stepped onto the stoop and closed the door behind her. "What are you offering?" she asked. 60%. You keep the house. No alimony. We walk away." "No," she said simply. He blinked. "No. 80 and support for 3 years. You will sign a statement acknowledging mistakes on both sides." "No." He rubbed his face. "Amara, be reasonable. If this goes to trial, it will get ugly. For both of us. It already did. You started it without telling me I was supposed to be playing." He swallowed, looked down at his shoes, and then back up with the expression he used to wear when selling a client on a project the numbers did not support. "I miss you," he tried. The words landed like a leaf on stone. She studied him, the way his mouth pressed into a thin line when he wanted something he hadn't earned. "What do you miss?" she asked. The version of me that forgave you faster than you could finish making the same mistake. Or the version that made your story about yourself easier to tell." He opened his mouth, closed it, and shook his head. "You are different," he said, as if it were an accusation. "I am exactly the same," she said. "I am just not contained." He left without a number they could share. Alicia texted 15 minutes later, as if she had been standing invisibly in the hedges. "Good. Let him get scared of trial. Trial preparation is a kind of archaeology. You dig where the ground gives, brush carefully, reveal bones, label each shard, and resist the urge to declare the skeleton complete before the skull is free." The next week became depositions, subpoenas to vendors who had discovered unbending integrity once served, and a forensic accountant who loved numbers the way poets love sound. He traced money not with accusation, but with tenderness for accuracy itself. "Money tells the truth," he said, tapping the page. "You just have to ask it in the right language." They deposed the CFO on a rainy Thursday. He arrived in a navy suit and caution. The first 10 minutes were a dance. He did not recall. He was not involved. He deferred to counsel. Then Alicia turned a page. "What is streamlined marital exposure?" she asked, pointing to the memo. A pause. His eyes flicked to his lawyer and back. "It's a general reference to minimizing risk by moving assets out of reach. I wouldn't characterize it that way. Characterize it another way." He exhaled, a surrender of air if not of strategy, ensuring liquidity for operational priorities. Operational priorities like Whitfield Consulting. Silence. The court reporter's keys clicked like rain against glass. "Who created the spreadsheet labeled friendly version?" "I don't know. Is this your font?" Objection. Sustained, the judge would later say when reading the transcript. But by then the damage was done. The CFO began to answer for real. Yes, he admitted, transfers were disguised as vendor payments. Yes, reimbursements happened after the joint card was used for personal travel. Yes, he understood the difference between market and marriage and had chosen the one that paid his bonus. When they finished, the CFO stood slowly, smoothing his tie as if fabric could undo fact. In the hallway, he paused beside Amara and said quietly, without looking at her, "I have a sister. I should have remembered that sooner." Then he walked away. That night, Amara took her mother's advice literally. She bought a used desk from a teacher who was retiring, carried it up 2 flights with a neighbor's help, and placed it in the spare room where the garment box lived under the bed. She set her laptop on it. She pinned a piece of paper to the wall with the word curriculum, written in a hand that had come to look like decision. She emailed 3 women she respected in education and corporate training and asked for 20 minutes of their time and their truest feedback. 2 replied within the hour. The third sent a calendar link for the next morning. Between calls, she cooked collards and cornbread and packed a plate for the neighbor who had carried the desk. He laughed when he took it. "My grandmother used to say, 'Greens make you strong enough to tell the truth,'" he said. "You're about to be very strong." The following week, the judge scheduled a settlement conference. It was not a trial, but it was not a coffee. People who understood their own risk often discovered it inside those rooms. Amara sat across from Caleb and Sloan, while their attorneys negotiated in measured tones, as if rearranging furniture in a house that might still be habitable if they found the right configuration. "We propose 70% to Mrs. Lewis," Alicia said, voice even. "Rehabilitative support for 4 years. Attorney's fees to be paid by Mr. Hart as sanction for discovery abuses, reversal of all unauthorized transfers, written apology attached to the record acknowledging misconduct." Caleb laughed once, short and sharp. "An apology on the record. Over my—" Sloane's hand landed lightly on his sleeve. Her nails were painted a pale pink, the color of an expensive lie. "Caleb," she said softly, not looking at him, just enough pressure to remind him where they were. Then to Alicia, warm enough to scald. "Surely we can resolve this without theater." Alicia kept her gaze on the mediator. "Theater is what your client brought to court on day 1. We are just turning on the lights." By afternoon's end, they had moved inches, not miles. The mediator, a former judge with the patience of a river, called it for the day. "Take the night," he said. "Look at the numbers as if they were strangers. Sometimes strangers tell the truth your friends cannot." On her way out, Amara passed Sloane near the elevators. For the first time, the other woman's expression was not polished. It was human. Sloane's voice dropped. "This is brutal," she said. It was not an apology. It wasn't even an admission. But it was air. "Brutal is what you called my existence at your gala," Amara said quietly. "Socially challenging, I believe you said." The elevator dinged. "I hope you learn a different vocabulary." At home, Amara set aside the law and built a slide deck for her pilot workshop. She titled Slide 1, The Ledger of Disrespect. Slide 2, Listening Harder Than They Lie. Slide 3, Proof is a Love Language. She added data, stories, exercises. She stayed up late and slept lightly and woke energized. Not because the fight was over, but because she finally had a horizon that was not the next motion. The next morning brought a small, bright surprise. An email from the district superintendent, subject line, Community Excellence Grant. One of Amara's colleagues had quietly nominated her for a micro-grant to support mentorship programming. "Congratulations," the superintendent wrote. "Your proposal to expand your girls' writing circle has been approved. Funds available immediately." She read the sentence twice and then a third time. Funds available immediately. She laughed alone in her kitchen, a clean sound. She texted Mia, "Assembly reads your poem, Friday. Prepare to own the room." That afternoon, Alicia called with a voice that carried both steel and a smile. "Last thing for today," she said. "The court set a firm trial date 6 weeks out. One more conference in 2 weeks. In the meantime, keep living, keep building, and get ready. Closing arguments do not write themselves." Amara closed her eyes and let the timeline click into place like a lock finding its key. 6 weeks, a lifetime, and a minute. She pictured a courtroom where facts would line up and answer to their names. She pictured a final morning when a judge would turn pages and speak order into a room that had survived too much theater. She opened her eyes, walked to the spare room, and pinned a new sheet of paper beside the word curriculum. This one read simply, "What comes after?" Under it, she wrote 3 lines. "Launch the workshop. Pilot with the girls. Never hand the pen to anyone who hasn't earned the ink." Outside, the elm lifted its branches against a sky rinsed clean by late rain. Inside, Amara felt something she had not felt since before the gala, before the fan, before the gold pen. It was light. Not the cheap kind. The kind you earn by refusing to go dim. The chapter did not end with applause. It ended with a calendar alert and a woman who set her alarm 15 minutes earlier than usual, so she would have time in the morning to write, to cook, to be taller. Trial was coming. So was the life that would not wait for it to finish. Trials begin with calendars and end with sentences, but what lives between those two is posture. People sit up straighter when the truth is coming. 6 weeks passed in days. The morning of trial, the courthouse steps were wet from a dawn shower that had rinsed the city clean enough to pretend. Amara paused at the top and looked back once. The elm on her block would be throwing shade across the sidewalk by now. A good, generous shade that didn't choose favorites. She inhaled, squared her shoulders, and went inside. Courtroom 6B smelled like stale coffee and lemon polish. A bailiff adjusted the flag. The court reporter tested her foot pedal, fingers hovering like a pianist over the keys. Alicia Moreno spread her notebooks on counsel table. Each tab a color Amara now could read like a legend. Across the aisle, Caleb's lawyer rehearsed a smile, the kind meant to reassure juries that men like his client were still safe investments. There would be no jury here. Only a judge with a memory for tone and a low tolerance for theater. Sloane entered on a click of heels and a perfume note timid enough to pass for humility. She sat behind Caleb and faced front with the posture of a student who had studied the wrong chapter and was hoping the teacher wouldn't notice. Caleb looked thinner. That gentled nothing. Judge Ortega took the bench. Good morning. We are here for trial in Lewis versus Hart. I have read the pretrial submissions. Counsel, call your first witness. Alicia stood. The state's burden is not ours, she began, voice even, but facts still want to be spoken aloud. We will show that Mr. Hart engaged in a systematic effort to deplete marital assets in anticipation of divorce, aided by Ms. Whitfield, and that Mrs. Lewis is entitled to the relief we seek. She turned slightly, not to perform for the gallery, but to let the whole room hear. We will also show that the humiliation has never been the point. The point is consequence. She called the forensic accountant. He wore a blue tie the color of utility and the calm of a man who believes numbers are a kind of ethics. He explained transfers and reimbursements and the oddity of a vendor named Whitfield Consulting that had no invoices for deliverables, only memos for vision. He pointed to highlights that revealed money moving in loops that looked like art until you realized the canvas was Amara's life. Caleb's lawyer cross-examined with bravado, asking whether good faith mistakes were possible, whether spreadsheets could be misread, whether conclusions could be biased. The accountant agreed in theory. In practice, he tapped the exhibit. Money tells the truth if you let it. In this case, the truth is not flattering. Alicia called Mr. Ellis, the bank manager, who testified about kindness and caution, and the moment he realized caution would be cruelty. He had seen lines of credit, he said, opened without clarity. He had seen spouses sign without knowing the floor had moved beneath them. It is not my job to referee marriages, he said. It is my job to be honest when asked a question I can answer. He had been honest. Then Alicia called Sloane. Please state your name for the record. Sloane Whitfield. Occupation, event designer, consultant, ownership interest in Whitfield Consulting, 100%. She sat with jaw set, eyes forward, hands folded on the table like a model of composure. Alicia nodded as if they were collaborating. Ms. Whitfield, you understand you are under oath. I do. You understand social media posts are not subject to deletion when they are litigation exhibits. Her smile flickered. I understand. Alicia placed a blown-up still on the easel. Candlelight, 2 glasses, the suggestion of a cufflink. Read the caption for the court. To uncomplicated futures. Were you referencing a future that included Mrs. Lewis? Objection? Relevance. Caleb's lawyer leaned forward. The post is not a legal document. The judge did not look up from his notes. Overruled. You may answer. We were referencing a business reorganization, Sloane said lightly. It was a metaphor. Alicia slid forward. Exhibit 41, the internal memo. Confirm SW will keep posts vague. Is this your initial? Silence. Yes. So you discussed keeping posts vague while financial decisions were made. We considered optics, Sloane said, the word brittle in her mouth. Optics of what? She met Alicia's eyes then, finally, of the transition. Transition from marriage to what? Objection. Asked and answered. The judge looked up, sustained as to form, rephrase. Transition from Mr. Hart's marriage to his relationship with you. Is that correct? Sloane's nails pressed crescents into her palm. We were exploring a partnership. Alicia's tone did not change. With funds that were not yours, with a house that was not yours, held as collateral for a line of credit that was not yours. She let the sentence sit there until the quiet around it felt like gravity. No further questions. On cross, Sloane's lawyer tried to refurbish the wreckage. He asked about competence and client lists and the fact that it is not illegal to fall in love or to start a business. It is not, Sloane agreed, relieved. But it is illegal to steal, Alicia said when redirect was permitted, and sat down. When Caleb took the stand, he looked like a man trying to remember lines he never practiced. His lawyer asked him about sacrifice, about the early years when Amara and he ate discount noodles and she believed in him enough to float their rent when his deals fell through. He spoke tenderly. Alicia let the tenderness exist. Then she stood. "Mr. Hart, you love your wife." He swallowed. "I did. I do. In a way. In a way. Did you love her the night you asked the bank to extend a line of credit against your house without her knowledge?" "I didn't think." She cut gently. "Yes or no?" "No." "Did you love her the morning you wired money from your joint account to Whitfield Consulting?" "I believed." "Yes or no?" "No." "Did you love her when you celebrated being rid of baggage?" He closed his eyes. "That was unkind." "Did you love her when your CFO prepared a friendly version of your finances?" He looked at the ceiling. "I trusted my team." "Did you love her when you posted nothing and hid everything?" He flinched. "We were going to make it right." "When?" He had no answer that would not indict him. Silence finally told the truth. Alicia softened her voice until it was almost kind. "Mr. Hart, here is what we know. You built a future on a foundation your wife paid for, with time, salary, and belief. When the future became inconvenient to share, you moved the foundation and expected the house to stand. It did not. Now you are shocked at the rubble. That is the story. No further questions." Amara did not look away. She held Caleb's gaze for one long second that contained every short second of the last 2 years. There was no gloating in her eyes, only completion. By mid-afternoon, the evidence had been admitted, the objections entered, the exhibits labeled. Judge Ortega called for closings the next morning. The room emptied in the orderly chaos of people who had practiced leaving. In the hallway, Alicia touched Amara's elbow. "Sleep," she said. "I will polish. You do not need to practice being yourself." Amara slept. Not deeply, but enough. She dreamt of a ginkgo shedding its leaves in one honest hour. In the morning, she braided her hair, chose the same black sheath dress, and slid her grandmother's bracelet over her wrist. She ate toast with jam, standing at the sink like her mother on Sundays. She looked into the spare room at the new desk and the paper pinned to the wall that read, "After the gavel." She did not read the bullets. She didn't need to. They were in her bones now. Back in 6B, Alicia rose for her closing. "There are words you will not hear from me," she began. "Revenge, drama, spectacle. Those are for people who profit from noise. We are here for something quieter and heavier." She gestured toward Amara without turning it into a spotlight. "This is a partnership that became a pipeline. Money that should have nourished a family irrigated a fantasy. The law is not offended by romance. It is offended by theft. Award Mrs. Lewis 70% of marital assets, rehabilitative support for 4 years, attorney's fees as sanctions, and any other relief you deem just. Not because she is angry, because she is owed." Caleb's lawyer stood and did the thing men in his role often do when they have more rhetoric than record. He spoke of complexity and grief and the ways good people make bad choices under pressure. He asked the court to remember that Mr. Hart had also built things and that some of those things were real. He asked for an even split. He asked for mercy. Judge Ortega did not rule immediately. He asked a few questions that were less about facts than about whether counsel had heard themselves. Then he recessed for 90 minutes that felt longer because silence is louder when outcomes are near. People made calls in the hallway, pacing small rectangles into the carpet with their shoes. When the judge returned, the room stood. "Please be seated." He placed reading glasses on the bridge of his nose and lifted a set of papers that were not yet the order but would become it. His voice was level. "It may be fashionable to treat courtrooms as stages," he said. "That fashion does not suit me." He began with findings. The court finds Mr. Hart transferred marital funds to an entity owned by his paramour without Mrs. Lewis's knowledge or consent. The court finds the line of credit against the marital home was obtained without notice, and that funds from that line supported non-marital travel and purchases. The court finds discovery responses from Mr. Hart were incomplete, and in some instances, misleading. The court finds Ms. Whitfield's testimony not credible where it conflicts with documentary evidence. Then the order. Marital assets will be distributed 72% to Mrs. Lewis, 28% to Mr. Hart. The marital home is awarded to Mrs. Lewis in FE. Rehabilitative support is ordered in the amount requested for 48 months. Attorney's fees are awarded to Mrs. Lewis as sanctions for discovery misconduct. All unauthorized transfers to Whitfield Consulting shall be reversed within 30 days. Failure to do so will result in contempt proceedings. The line of credit against the marital home shall be refinanced in Mrs. Lewis's name only within 90 days, with Mr. Hart responsible for all costs associated with the refinance and any interim interest. His gaze flicked to Sloane. As Ms. Whitfield is not a party, the court's sanction authority is limited. However, the court refers the matter of Whitfield Consulting's banking transactions to the appropriate authorities for review. The court also orders Ms. Whitfield to refrain from deleting any records pending that review. A murmur moved through the gallery, smoothed again by the bailiff's look. The judge continued. Finally, the court orders that Mr. Hart issue a written acknowledgment to be filed with this court that his conduct, including asset transfers and concealment, violated his duties to his spouse. This is not a scarlet letter. It is a record. People are entitled to accurate stories about their lives. He set the papers down. That is the order. Counsel will prepare and submit a proposed form consistent with these findings. We are adjourned. The gavel did not bang. It did not need to. The room released a breath it hadn't realized it held. Caleb stared at the table as if tracing the grain could reveal an escape hatch. Sloane's hands shook for one delicate second before she commanded them still. Alicia touched Amara's wrist just above the bracelet. "You did that," she whispered. "Not me." "You." Amara nodded, not because she agreed, but because she finally believed she had not disappeared. She turned. Her eyes found Sloane's. The other woman's chin lifted, then lowered in emotion that wasn't quite apology, wasn't quite defiance. It was human. Amara gave her nothing more than a steady look. Some lessons arrive only when the lights are this bright. In the hallway, Ms. Lindstrom waited near the window with sunlight flattening the lines of worry on her face. She had come without telling Amara. "I read the docket this morning," she said. "I wanted to be here if you needed me to say the thing I should have said 2 months ago. I believe you. I'm sorry I let optics speak louder than integrity." "Thank you," Amara said simply. "We have an assembly Friday. Mia is reading her poem. Come hear her. You will be proud." I am all ready," Ms. Lindstrom said, and left with a breath that sounded like relief's older sister. Caleb approached, hands at his sides, palms empty. "This isn't how I wanted it to end," he said. He looked smaller in the bright light of consequence. "I thought I was protecting yourself," Amara finished. "I know." He glanced back at Sloane, then at the door to the courtroom. "Are you happy?" She considered the question. It was too small for the day. "I am whole," she said. "I will be happy because I am whole." He nodded as if memorizing that line for a play he would be in alone. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I hope you learned something expensive enough to keep," she replied. He did not answer. He could not. Outside, the city was loud and ordinary. Amara and Alicia crossed the plaza without speaking. At the corner, Alicia held up a hand. "I'm stealing you for 1 hour," she said. "We win, we debrief, we eat. Law of the land." They sat at a cafe with banged-up tables and coffee that didn't apologize for being strong. Alicia flipped her notebook open to a page titled, "Post, Financial Mechanics, Deadlines, Liens Released, Refinance Steps, Calendar Dates." "We will do the heavy lifting," she said. "Your job is to keep living and to write your program. The world does not need another silent expert." Across the street, a group of teenagers spilled out of a bus, swatting each other's backpacks and laughing like the future was obligated to open for them. Amara watched them and felt something loosen at the base of her throat. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to her girls' writing circle. "Friday, assembly. We are bringing armor indoors." That night, she cooked for her mother. Collards, cornbread, chicken with lemon and thyme. Her mother ate with the curiosity of a person who knows food can be love or sermon. She set her fork down and looked at her daughter's face as if reading a paragraph out loud. "You look taller," she said again. "Everyone keeps saying that. It's true. You know why? Because I had to. Because you decided to." They washed dishes without words. a rhythm they'd practiced since Amara could reach the sink on a stool. After, her mother kissed her forehead and lingered a beat. The world will tell this story about a judge and a mistress and money, she said. Let them. You tell the story about paper that turned into a foundation. Then she put on her coat and went home to her favorite chair and her evening news and her crocheting bag that still held a scarf she'd promised to finish by spring. The next morning, an email arrived from the district. Congratulations on your Community Excellence Grant. Funds available immediately. Another email arrived from a corporate HR director who had heard about Amara's workshop through a friend and wanted to know if she had availability in the next quarter. A third arrived from a community college asking if she would guest lecture in a class called Ethics and Organizations. The subject line was a sentence Amara had written on her wall. After the gavel, she stood in the doorway of the spare room and stared at the paper pinned above the desk. Under the heading, she added 4 words. We begin next month. Friday's assembly filled the auditorium with squeaking chairs and a buzz of whisper shout. Ms. Lindstrom sat on the aisle, hands folded. Alicia slid into the back with a coffee and the practiced anonymity of a person who knows when to let other people be seen. When Mia's name was called, the 8th grader walked to the mic with knees that pretended to wobble. Her poem was called Armor. It began with a confession and ended with a door. When it finished, the room was still for a beat. Then the sound arrived, a clean, rising applause that was not polite. It was proud. Afterward, Mia ran to Amara and threw teenage arms around her waist before remembering she was supposed to be cool. Amara bent to her ear. You read it the way the truth sounds, she said. Mia glowed. I learned from the best, she whispered, and then immediately winced at her own earnestness and rolled her eyes. Don't tell anyone I said that. I won't, Amara promised. It's in the vault. On the way back to her office, Amara's phone buzzed. Alicia again. Final orders signed, scanned, and on their way. Sanctions deadline in 30 days. Call if your refinance officer gives you even a nanosecond of trouble. Thank you, Amara texted. Always, Alicia replied. Now go write your next chapter. The door to Amara's office closed with the soft click she had come to love. She sat at her desk, opened her notebook to a fresh page, and wrote 3 headings. What I owe myself, what I owe others, what I owe no one. Under the first, she wrote sleep, soup, a walk. Under the second, she wrote the workshop, the girls, the truth. Under the third, she wrote explanations. She wrote for an hour. When she looked up, sunlight was making little islands on her floor. The world was still the world, messy, loud, tilted. But the tilt no longer leaned her in a direction she hadn't chosen. She stood, stretched, and laughed at nothing. The sound surprised her. It was not a victory cackle or a ballad. It was the warm, ordinary laugh of a woman who had built a door and then walked through it without asking. In the weeks that followed, checks arrived and were reversed. The refinance closed. Caleb sent the written acknowledgement the judge had ordered. It was curt, stripped of adjectives, strangely moving in its plainness. He did not ask to meet again. Neither did she. Sloane's feed went quiet, then reappeared with seminars about resilience and rebranding. If there was a lesson in there for her, Amara hoped it was expensive enough to keep. The first session of After the Gavel met on a Tuesday evening in a room at the community center where Amara had once tutored multiplication tables. 10 women sat in a circle with notebooks in their laps and a look in their eyes Amara recognized immediately. The look of people who have decided to stop apologizing for bleeding. She began simply. Welcome. We're here to turn humiliation into curriculum. We're here to practice listening harder than they lie. We're here to make a ledger of disrespect and then decide what to do with it. We are not here for revenge. We are here for repair. They talked about dates and amounts, about words the world uses to make women feel small, about the way a bank teller's glance can carry 1,000 kinds of doubt. They made lists. They practiced quiet. They practiced loud. They practiced saying no without a paragraph attached. When the session ended, nobody wanted to leave. They hugged at the door and promised to bring a friend next time. They meant it. After the last woman left, Amara stood alone in the echo of chairs being set back under tables. She imagined the course 10 sessions long, certified, funded, portable. She imagined corporate HRs asking not for a lecture, but for a change. She imagined girls reading poems at assemblies and principals sitting in the aisle. She imagined the elm in full leaf and a house that belonged to her, not because a judge had said so, but because she had decided to claim the things she had built. On her way home, she stopped at the corner store where she had once bought a black and white composition notebook. She picked up another. The clerk nodded like a person who recognized a ritual when he saw one. "Big project," he said. "Big life," she answered. At home, she set the new notebook beside the old one and watched the way they looked together. Two spines, both marbled, both stubborn. She wrote a title on the first page of the new book. What comes after? Then she wrote the date. Then she started. If you are waiting for fireworks here, there aren't any. There is only the soft thunder of a city that did not stop for one woman's victory and a woman who did not ask it to. There is a judge who went home and fed his dog and read a novel and forgot the smell of lemon polish by bedtime. There is a man who stared too long at a blank wall and started, for the first time in months, to consider what making amends might actually mean. There is a woman who bought a plain notebook and turned it into a door. And there is you, listener, who stayed to the end. Maybe your life doesn't look like a courtroom. Maybe it looks like a boardroom, a classroom, a kitchen, a shop floor. The point is not where the gavel fell. The point is that you can build what comes after. Amara did not become a different person. She stopped being contained. She did not become a symbol. She became explicit. She did not win a war. She ended a theft. That is all. That is everything. On a Sunday afternoon in late spring, she and her mother sat on the stoop with bowls of strawberries slick with sugar. The elm's shade fell over the steps like a blessing. Down the block, a little girl practiced cartwheels on a strip of grass, falling more than she landed, laughing more than she fell. Amara lifted her face to the green in the light. Her mother nudged her knee. "Do you hear it, baby?" "Hear what?" "Your life," her mother said, smiling. "It's loud again." Amara listened. She did. It was.